Hey, good afternoon. This is our last session for the day. Glad to see everyone attending. We have Patrick Dempsey here today, and he is going to be presenting Openness to Otherness, Creating Transformative Online Communities. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you all for making it to this late in the day. So this is a little bit of a heady one, so I hope you're tuned in, but I'm going to keep you engaged. And at the end, we'll get super practical, kind of work out all our knowledge together. So since it is sort of a small crowd, I'm gonna expect you all to be on the chat the whole time, participating and really sharing and creating our own sort of transformative community together. So I'm gonna start sharing my slides and then we'll get right to it. Excellent. Now I did want to really quick, just if anyone wants the slides to follow along, you can just fill that out in the chat. And it'll just give you access to a PDF. If you just need to look at them in another way than I'm sharing. All right, so this work is based on the book I published last year about transformative learning, basically the relationship between the community of inquiry, transformative learning, and complexity theory. And it's super interesting. And I think the implications for instructional design are really quite astounding and powerful if we can operationalize them. So let's get right to it. And this is going to be fun. We're going to do a ton of questions. Whenever you see a box like this is your cue to chat. So state real quick in the chat whether you believe the Earth is flat or round. And this is a safe space. If you do not concur with accepted knowledge. Spherical, thank you. Not exactly round. Is that what that means? I'm not a science person. All right. So that was some of you. It was not all of you. I hope that all of you, because there's not many of us, will chime in every question, and there's a ton of questions. It only works if we're all involved. So here's an interesting fact, perhaps you knew this already, that several million Americans believe in a flat Earth and tens of millions more just aren't sure what to think. And here's another cue. We saw that box for a question. Here's a cue in the lower right, means you'll see like the author's name or something in a little sphere there. That means it's from some research. So back in the chat, why do you think so many people believe the Earth is flat? So some misinformation from Jessica. Kelly's saying, like, we look out and we see. So if someone finds a theory, they're like, well, I've studied this, you see, and you're really, Audrey, we're going to get to that for sure about the trusting, Beth for saying same. See how we get there. I think part of this is how do we get there? Interesting. So all good ideas. So conspiracy, all related for sure. So this is a long quote. If you can read for a second, I just bolded what I thought was the really interesting point and sort of just true of me at least. Our contradictory ideas can coexist in an unexamined harmony. Wow, yikes. Until something forces us to contrast them against each other. And then I love this last part. There is little obvious contrast between two patches of mental fog, meaning like we know a lot of things, but we've never really thought deeply about many of them. So they're just up there. There are plenty of ideas that we have that contradict. We just don't think much about them, so they're fine. So here's an illustration. It's not like a MasterCard sponsorship. I realized that after I created it, but here's an illustration of two patches of mental fog. And on the one hand, someone mentioned personal experience. It's the Earth seems flat to us. And on the other hand, there's science, and the science says that it's not. We've got all this scientific evidence. So the Earth seems flat on the personal experience side. I don't feel like I'm spinning 1,000 miles an hour. I certainly don't feel like we're moving at 66,000 miles an hour. It seems odd to me. And then the public evidence says, well, we clearly are. There's satellite imagery. People have said they've gone into space. They've done these things. So here they are. Now, here's the question. Some of you perhaps have some. I personally don't. List the evidence you have personally verified that supports whatever your beliefs are in terms of the Earth being round or flat. Personally verified, not hearsay. Hearsay from Audrey. Right. I mean, that's right. Apparently, so I don't know how GPS works. Then Steve, you definitely could. I definitely don't. So it's not strong evidence for me because I have no idea. I don't know how most think. I have no idea how we're communicating right now. So Melissa's going to take the astronaut's word for it, which I would say is probably a trustworthy guy. You know, Audrey, those satellites could be faked. Is it really that big of a curve though, Jen, really? I mean, that could be deception too. So yeah, so we, you know, we don't have as much evidence, I think, as we like, I know I'm standing here right now for this belief, but we would hold it probably just as strongly. So what might happen? So like we're having this conversation, you're like, this is interesting. I'm not doubting it, but let me just look. So someone is here and they're a little skeptical and they start searching on the internet. What might happen as they search for evidence for the flat earth? Oh, that's a good one, Melissa. So they maybe start asking some friends. Hey, have you heard about this? Did you know? Millions of people. Kelly just like, let's type it in and we'll find it. But they're like circles, Jessica, right? They're not like 3D. It's like a disc, right? Because like a lot of the representations are like discs. I guess it's not exactly flat because like there's got to be some. I don't think it's like a piece of paper. Still three-dimensional. So they probably, Audrey, right, find some evidence in both ways. So as a little bit of setup, what does all of this setup about searching for information, finding information, having an idea, not knowing what you're talking about when you really have a firmly held beliefs, what does this have to do with transformation? And there's no right answer here. There's no wrong answer here. Just what are you thinking about it? Different perspectives from Jessica? Sure. It definitely is, Audrey. It's difficult to people have firm beliefs. And what we're saying is like, most of us have really firm beliefs that the earth is round, and you really can't disabuse us of that, even though I'm not really going to be able to produce any evidence for it that I've personally verified. Confirmation bias, right, Melissa? Like we're just going to go online, we're going to find it, and then it's just going to be this snowball where it's like, see, it is flat. Yeah, Kelly, that's probably one of the most powerful statements that anyone's ever responded to this question. And that's at the core of openness to otherness, right? Is wow, like maybe I can be sure, but does that mean that like I have like the justification and the warrant that I should be willing to die for this idea if someone else has a different perspective on it? Maybe not. So good setup here. And this is going to draw us to our three objectives. We're going to describe the common features of transformative experiences. We'll explain how course design relates to this concept of transformative learning. And then we'll kind of tie it all together and we'll do a little practice activity where we start identifying practical ways that we can start applying transformative practices into our courses or for designers into our design practices. So the first one, let's describe the common features of transformative learning experiences. So at this point, you're here, you came here for a reason. What's your understanding of transformative learning? And I don't know is a reasonable answer. Having that aha moment, which QM is having, I believe, at 5:10 after this session, discussing aha moments from the day. So it's a learning process that is just not about information, but about transformation. It's being changed by an experience that you have. Excellent. That's like 3 or 4 out of 20, 15 of us. So let's do it. Excellent. So yeah, Audrey, we'll get to some like service-based, problem-based learning for sure. can definitely be transformative experiences. So in the literature, from the research, again, you can note that by the lower right, Mesereau really came up with this, the uniquely adult form of metacognitive reasoning by which we justify, we talked about that, justifying our beliefs through critical assessment. And this is what we would do when we're thinking about this flat earth. We would think about why the premise is like, why is it that I believe what I believe? How is it that I come to have this thought, or how is it that I come to have any sort of thought? And then ultimately, the tip of the iceberg, the thing that we end up seeing is what is it that I believe? A metanoia, are we studying Greek here? This is excellent. Yeah, so like a total change of perspective for sure. But it's also this process, like transformative learning doesn't mean we actually get somewhere specifically, but it's a process by which we're doing these things. We're like, oh, I never thought about why I think the earth is round. That's the tip of the iceberg. The earth is round. How do I come to that knowledge? Well, high school textbooks. I've talked to other people. I've seen these things. That's how I accumulate that knowledge. And why do I believe that? Well, it seems like I don't have good reason otherwise. And all the people that I respect as authorities say that. That's the process by which I ended up having this belief. So at any point, we could start dissecting elements of that. So this is one way that people experience transformative learning. This is a really useful way. There's a non-determining start, which is potentially like this presentation. You never thought about a flat earth before, and then you start doing some research, undirected inquiry. As someone mentioned, you start socially testing the idea with your peers. Does this work? Have you guys heard about this? Then you're like, you know what? I am studying this more. This is super interesting. This is more important to me. And then you're like, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to become a flat earther. And then maybe there's a community waiting for you. And then all of a sudden, like, you're like, I'm in. And it maybe at that point has a little less to do with what you believe and more of like who you are in that belief. And that's how transformation can work. And all of this is really about, and this was touched on in a couple of questions we have, self-other interactions. It's about me thinking about what I know, and it's about me thinking about what I know with other people. And these things are colliding and they're interacting, and this metanoia is happening through these interactions. So we had touched on these a little bit. A couple of people said why someone would become a flat earther. So what else might happen as you start reconstituting your identity through this process? What other ideas might change for someone that becomes the flat earther? What other things might they start inspecting? Melissa, perfect, right? I mean, I would assume they're going to be like, well, the scientific authority is no longer the process by which I get my knowledge. Right, the moon landing, right? Like any sorts of things like this. Maybe you're just more open to the idea that all the information you're getting from anyone who is not you is potentially flawed. All the things I learned in school, how do I know it's true? Perfect, exactly. Yeah, so, and you can see how this could be like a self-fulfilling sort of prophecy. So that's one way to think about transformation. It's a very pragmatic way. And I think when we think about transformative learning, we're really thinking about this. We want to bring someone into our course, have that service learning opportunity, and then hopefully have them think differently and maybe about other people. That's certainly a worthwhile goal. But I want to present a different way, a broader way of thinking about it, which I think is so important for our society today. Another way to think about transformative learning is about human becoming. And it's really about the phases or the stages that we go through in our life. And these are just ring true. People have different theories. These just ring true to experience in my life. The incorporative stage is when you're just born and remember everything's a part of you. And then we learn about like the babies don't know where things are if you take them away. Then impulsive, of course, you get your terrible twos. Then you just become imperial and you're like an 8-year-old and everything is your way or the highway. Then you're a teenager and then everything is about your friends. Your whole identity is a socialized mind. And then you get a little bit older and you're like, you know what? I'm my own person. I'm going to do things my way. And a lot of the times we think about that, like that self-fulfillment, that self-actuality as being the peak, but really the self-transforming mind is the place of ultimate human becoming in this theory of transformative learning. And it's really this illustration of this Russian nesting doll, I don't know how to say the word, is a great way to illustrate this, where we could really think of ourselves in the self-transforming mind as like almost any of these pieces, but almost like the smallest or the biggest. And in the image on the right here, where they're unnested, where I understand that I am formed and informed by self and other interactions. Like I obviously am not impenetrable to them. Like I'm necessarily created by them, and I have to interact with them, but they are not ultimately who I am. So while I'm part of this nesting doll, I am not the nesting doll. While I make up a part of it, I am not it. And this is the most critical, I think, the foundation for understanding openness to otherness. And so remember, I am part of the nesting doll, but I'm not the nesting doll. So let me ask you to share some thoughts you're having about what this has to do, this idea of human becoming, self-transforming mind, that I'm formed and informed by the self and others, but I am not them. What does this have to do with openness to otherness? Yeah, I think a lot of people end up wanting to just see familiar ideas because there is a discomfort. There is a discomfort in being like, I'm part of this stacking doll, and like part of the stacking doll is totally not in alignment with the way I view things. And Cynthia's saying like, yeah, we need to listen a little bit more deeply. I don't think there's anything necessarily nefarious about the person that becomes the flat earther. We can now perhaps see how they got there. They probably started in the same place we did, but then maybe they took some steps that ended up somewhere else. And then all of a sudden they have this other crazy belief. And like, I'm sure we're all thinking of other beliefs that people might have that have this. And we're like, oh, that's how you got there. But we both started at the same place. And oddly enough, we're both part of, unfortunately in some ways, but fortunately in other, this stacking doll together. You don't have to become the thing to be engaged with it. Wow, that's like, tweet that out, someone. That is beautiful, Beth. That is beautiful. And yeah, definitely, you can see how cults would happen because it is more comfortable to just get in a stacking doll with other people that you stack well with. Yeah, how opposite is it? Right, that maybe there's a degree of like the little one can go to the next little one, but maybe not the really big one. Excellent, I love those. So let's really quickly, we talked about the features of transformative learning experiences, and I'm just going to recap them here. It's about human becoming, but it's based on these self-other interactions. And believe me, we're going to get very practical with this. And what's happening in these experiences is one of these elements is being tested and then reconstituted. Maybe the product, maybe the earth isn't flat. And then I start looking at the evidence in the process. And then I'm like, why do I believe that? And then I'm like, I don't believe those folks anymore. And so now I'm this. And so that's what's happening. And that's good framework for us as we try to shape these experiences in our spheres of influence as educators. So now that we know a little bit about that, human becoming, self-other interactions, product, premise, and process, let's talk about how course design is related to this. So in the chat, let me know if you've seen these movies, either of them, or something like it, and what they're about, just super short. And it's okay to admit, I've seen both of these movies. Thank you, Melissa. I don't feel like the other anymore. Steve, award. I've never seen Titanic. Okay, Kelly, how a choice in one moment in time can alter your future dramatically. Thank you. That's perfect. Perfect. A small, inconsequential moment can affect everything. That's right. That's exactly right. So this is how it ties to education. Every teacher needs to understand that she is working within a sensitive learning ecology whose direction can be altered by small changes in the boundary conditions and interaction patterns of the classroom. In other words, small things that our students experience can have ripple effects, can have seemingly inconsequential experiences and interactions, can have really consequential effects. And so I want us to think about this idea of bumping into, and this idea that when we bump into something, other things, unintended things happen. And bumping into can be positive, like they bump into you and you're just full of grace and hope and joy, and you bring sunshine to your course, your class, or they run into a tool that's not working. So what are some things that students might bump into in your course? Or a course you're designing or working on, of course you've been in, other students, a whole bunch of other stacking dolls. Jargon, excellent. Vocabulary, perfect. David, poor directions, right. Broken links, bad formatting, like making it really difficult to navigate. The content itself. So a triggering event, content that really sets them off, maybe good or bad. Attitudes and perspectives that maybe align or don't align. Obviously the LMS. Images, which can be positive or negative. So what might happen as students are bumping into some of these things? You know, we hope that they're coming into our experience set to learn, and you're at this presentation and maybe you're hoping like, look, you know what, I have some unique opportunity to create experiences that could be potentially transformative for my students. I want to do this. But there's bad links and there's images that maybe don't make sense. There's the LMS itself. There's other students. So what's happening? What might happen, good or bad, as students bump into some of these things? Well, easiest, right? They just become disengaged. Like that seems like the most obvious. Maybe it's just a reading that just doesn't fit with where they're at and they're just not into it. They don't have a full understanding, as David's saying. Lost and confused, maybe that changes their motivation. So this is huge. I mean, there's a ton of different ways to think about this idea of mindset, as Steve's saying, as of a readiness to learn. But when we're talking about these higher level goals, this whole goal of like, I have stewardship over these students and the opportunity to create an environment that can lead to positive transformation, that my students come away with a certain openness to otherness, or at least they're on the path to it. Super important that the things that we're putting into our course would propel that and not hinder that. So complexity theory can be used to prescribe actions in situations that promote change and development. So we do have the ability from the literature to actually create some things within our course that are more likely to promote the sorts of outcomes that we want. We're not trying to predict them, and we're certainly not dictating what those outcomes could be. Someone might become a flat earther because of their new openness to otherness, but we are trying to create that environment. And it's really about this idea of interactions and these boundary conditions. And that's what this literature keeps coming back to. Like, if we have an environment that's set for this and we have interactions that are positive for this, then we might be able to put our students on a path for transformation. And so this is just summarized simply as interactions determine outcomes. It's going to be the interactions of students bumping into different things that are going to determine whether or not we're successful in our course generally, but certainly in our course, creating it to be a transformative learning environment. So that's really our second objective, explaining the importance of course design. Well, it's interactions determine outcomes. And the heuristic that I would like to keep, or that could be helpful for you to keep, is that we consider what might happen when students bump into X. I mean, that's just a great thing. You can go back to your course, look at a module in it. If you're teaching face-to-face, go into your physical classroom. What might happen when students bump into this or this? And just start assessing what you have there. So now we're going to get practical. We've set a foundation. We're going to do a couple of ideas, and then we're going to work together to come up with some really practical solutions. So there's really three elements when we're creating this transformative online community. It's the opportunities, which are the actual strategies that we're going to use. These are the explicit strategies that we'll use. Service learning, someone mentioned that, experiential learning. The space, that's going to be those boundary conditions. That's what the people are operating in, and we'll give this idea about fractal design. We'll explain that real quickly. And then interactions, just like we talked about. And this idea of feedback and feed forward, these two forces working together to keep students from falling off, from becoming disengaged, and at the same time, keeping them moving forward. So we'll look at each of these. But real quick before that, the importance of all of this, there's been a lot of theory and hopefully some interesting conversation to this point. But the importance of this is transformation. You just don't know when it's going to happen. And the image here is the hourglass, the sand glass, where if you flipped it over each time, one at a time, the grains of sand are going to fall, and they stack up, and at every time a different grain of sand is going to cause that initial tower to collapse, and it's going to collapse in a different way. And we don't know what point that critical mass is. For one student, maybe it's that one experience and they have that aha moment. For another student, it's 4 or 5 courses where it finally starts to sink in that this is a process. It is safe for me to start thinking in this way, for allowing others in, that I'm not identified by others. So we don't know, and that's why we want to do all of these things as often as possible. Those things being creating the opportunities within a good space and making sure that our interactions are working to foster the types of outcomes that we want. So let's look at those opportunities. I listed a couple here. Some have been mentioned in the chat already. Perspective taking, obviously, trying on new roles, reflection, projection, student research, learner-centered, learner-driven activities, XR, VR stuff, becoming more popular, service learning, project problem-based, mentoring, virtual studies abroad, studying abroad. Obviously, that's a fairly obvious list. There's nothing like too aha there. What are some other things that you've done, things that you've thought about, things that you've tried that have the potential to be transformative, that you know of to be transformative, that you're thinking about trying? Excellent. So they're forced to take both sides, Audrey, maybe 3 sides of idea. That's always one of the most powerful things, where you're becoming the arguer against yourself. Guest speakers are bringing in a totally different perspective for students to hear. Any more? Just want to make sure we get a couple in there. We're gonna make these really practical in about 5 minutes while we work together. All right, so let's go on to the space. Let's talk about these boundary conditions and fractal design. So how cool are fractals? You all know fractals? These self-repeating, self-similar patterns that are found in nature, golden ratio, things like that. I don't know much about it, besides that it's cool. No one knows fractals. Very cool. I think they're amazing. I mean, it's just so cool. And the idea is that it's a simple pattern that repeats over the Fibonacci sequence. Yeah, that repeats over and over again, that creates like just these amazing shapes, these amazing entities. It's just from very simple, it's the same thing happening over and over again, which is the point. So when we do that in course design, let's see what this looks like at a very low level. And this is just for thought, but the idea is self-similarity, repeating patterns. So let's take a 6-module course, just because it's easy to explain. And let's say that we want to create a flow for students' thought that follows at a very basic level Bloom's taxonomy. So in module 1, they're going to remember, then they're going to understand, reply. And so that's what we do. That's how we structure the course. Well, so that's the basic shape, the basic rules. And what we do is then we layer that into the module. So the module 1 itself actually takes the shape again through these 3 activities. We're going to have them remember, understand. So it's self-similar. Remember that student, that critical mass, maybe it takes them 5 courses, 10 courses, but they're going through that process. And this is really where it gets cool. When we start doing things like layering on values to our course design. And we can say, again, this is sort of pushing the example, but it's meant to just show the potential of this. So we layer diversity, hospitality, inclusion, equity, love, service into our course. And then we do that again, and we try to make them connected to the assessment. So now they're going through this process of remembering from least to most complex. They're going through and experiencing our values. Then maybe on top of that, we add some specific practices. Because it's not going to be enough for Audrey to just do, the only experience they have is with Audrey's self-debate. That's not going to be, for most students, a transformative experience. But we do it over and over and over again. And so we layer that in down to the module. And you can imagine what this is going to look like when you have all of those modules taking that self-similar shape. And the shape is up to you. The shape is however you might like to design a course. But if you keep doing it, that's the space, that's going to form the interactions that are going to create the potential for transformation. And this is one of the coolest things, just real quick before we go on to those interactions, is just watch hospitality and reflection here. Because if we're using this self-similar shape, and you can think of this as, let's say you used to use a certain tool for video discussions that's sort of outdated, but a lot of people still use. And it was in there. And instead you're like, I'm going to try this new tool. So instead of hospitality, I want to try openness. And instead of reflection, I want to try projection. Or instead of this old tool that has video discussions, I want to try this new tool. And if you know where it is, you can replace it in all those spots. And all of a sudden, you've transformed your entire course. Because you know the spaces where those elements are. And when you change it in one space, you're necessarily changing it in all those other spaces. So Audrey has already said she's never occurred to design like this before. So what are some ideas that you're having about using self-similar or repeating patterns in course design? Do you do it? Is this a new idea that you might want to try? Too complicated? Certainly doesn't have to be used just if you're trying to create transformative communities. Thank you, Melissa. I mean, it definitely keeps us as instructional designers honest to our work, right? I mean, I love the idea of promoting values in courses if the school has them. We're very committed to values at my school, and we have a diversity course. We're diversity courses. And I just feel like that's odd that you would have to have a course about diversity as opposed to actually creating diversity in all your courses. But that's just me. I have no authority. Cognitive load for sure. Just that expectation that, oh yeah, this is going to happen over and over again. So you don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about it. All right. Would have loved to hear from a few more of you, but you're all texting. You're all on Slack. Keep in touch with each other. It's fine. Take no offense. So the last one, interactions. Thank you, Steve. I guilted you into commenting. Yeah, the idea that the structure can change super quickly is amazing. So interactions. So in the chat, here's an image on the lower right, and it's a roadway, like in a mountain. And on the left of it is like a guardrail, and then it's a road, and then in the middle is the lane. I don't know what you call them, the lane line painted between the lines. And on the left, it says negative feedback over the guardrail. In the middle, it says positive feedback over the lane. So based on this image, what do you think negative and positive feedback are? What do you think they do? Yeah, so I mean, that's a good way to think about it, Melissa. Like you smack into the thing, right? Like boom, like that's that negative feedback. But as Kelly says, it's also going to keep you falling over the cliff. It's going to hurt, but it's not going to hurt as bad as it could have. Excellent. Positive feedback guides, negative feedback corrects. They both definitely change and reinforce behavior for sure. Great. So yeah, negative feedback is more corrective, it's more controlling, helps you avoid failure. Positive feedback is directive, it's propelling, and it's amplifying success. So together, we get this concept of feed forward, is that if we do these things together, we're going to propel. Because remember, these interactions, if we do it wrong, if we just go, hey, debate with yourself, it could go totally awry. We need to have negative feedback on Audrey's debate so that they don't do it wrong, that they actually just don't go off the cliff of doing a terrible assignment and not getting what the purpose is. And we have positive feedback. We have to have them, give them room to actually propel their learning, to find new ways of understanding. So with that, I am going to share in the chat a document that's going to help us hopefully pull all of this information together into some practical ways about the strategies that we talked about. So that's in the chat. Hopefully I'm still sharing the PowerPoint. Can someone tell me if I am, or am I sharing the Google document? Thank you. I don't know how to pronounce your name, I'm sorry. Thank you, thank you. So yeah, so I just put a couple of those transformative practices in here. And talked about what are the corrective measures and the negative feedback? How can we keep people from failing during perspective taking or trying on new roles? What are some ways that we can propel their success? And then if you have spaces a little bit more tricky, if you have ideas about creating a space that's going to be conducive to positive outcomes in these. And this is challenging. This is definitely asking us to apply what we've learned in a very short time. So. And there's no even examples on it, which would probably be helpful for next time. Note to self. So for service learning, I'm thinking to keep students from failing, I would definitely have them propose their projects ahead of time and list some potential challenges they might face. Some positive for service learning, I might hook them up with a mentoring. I don't know about a space. Excellent, reading circles, good. For perspective taking, I feel like for the negative feedback, I think it's like Audrey said, like you want to make sure that they're somehow interacting with both perspectives, which is definitely corrective. We don't want them to go too far. Just sort of similar to the positive feedback. Maybe share with peers and have peers add on to the diverse perspectives. Excellent. So a reflection, yeah. So I know reflections are great, but without that tie specific to concepts or past learning or maybe future anticipated learning, right? I think it can go wrong. So using a forum to kind of allow students to share that space, that knowledge. Excellent, just do about 30 more seconds here. I know this was hard, that we all have access to this. We can all think about this. This is the hard work of doing this. Certainly transformation, like we said, is not easy. Branching scenarios, I love that. That's an amazing idea. Really showing what might happen because you made this decision. Amazing idea, love that. All right, so meanwhile, thank you for doing that. I know that was challenging. Hopefully that helped us solidify some of the information that we were creating together. So those were our objectives. And I wanted to summarize it here in a single screen. Hopefully the images will help. Transformative learning is about human becoming. And we have that image of the stacking doll. Transformative learning happens as interactions determine the outcomes. And we're thinking about that butterfly effect, students bumping into things. And then transformative learning is supported by the opportunities, the space, and the interactions. So we know the strategies, we went over those. Those are on that document, but the images are that road with the negative and positive feedback, making sure that we're creating an opportunity for them to not fail and actually to succeed. And then these designs that are self-repeating, those is how we'll create that space. So as I said, this was sort of heady, and it's the end of your day on Friday. So just take a moment to think about, so a colleague comes up, they weren't able to attend. They say, hey, you were at that presentation. In a few words, why don't you summarize what you would share with them, your key takeaways? Excellent, pithy, and helpful, Melissa, for sure. And Cynthia, definitely. I mean, it is about the idea that we should be developing, right? Well, I think one problem, I mean, I love grading. It's important to let students know that they're reaching competencies, but they need that growth mindset. They need to know that we're developing and that we're not there yet. Yeah, one small thing can make a big difference. And that's where I think that person's comment about, like, in reflections or projections, calling back what you used to learn, like, oh, right. And that can keep changing. Layering values. I love that also. Yeah, and so this is going to take a little, like David's saying, it's going to maybe, like in your course, you can do it, right? But then you're going to talk to your colleagues and be like, hey, what are ways that, because they take your course next, what are some ways that we can work together to make sure that we're creating the best experience we can? And it is true, like a lot of them we can do that, like that first step, that first level of transformation, where it's like the non-determining start. And we can do that. We can just embed these things, as Audrey's saying, in the course. Human becoming, interactions, definitely critical mass is different for all students. That is exactly right. So I appreciate it. Again, I know it is late and the end of the day. Here's a little bit of information about me. So this came from that book. It's overpriced. I don't make any money from it. I mean, I'm sure they'll send me like $1 or $2. Certainly not how I'm making my income. I do have a discussion app. Someone mentioned Packback. It's launching in the fall. We've developed it and beta tested it for the past few years. If you want to have early access, either as an individual user or potential pilot partner, again, I'm just an academic. We try to power equitable achievement through developmental discussions. It's really awesome, really exciting. So if you're interested, no pressure, you won't get spammed. I'll just contact you when we launch. Any last minute questions or comments that you have? Again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you, Melissa and Beth. Thank you, everyone.